Yeah, Eric. Looks like,
Well, okay, I can hear you.
there you go.
Okay. Can you hear
Sorry,
me?
I just realized that I was like on the whole time. I thought I was backstage, maybe still.
No, can you hear me though?
Yeah, no, you're clear. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. I have not done that for quite a while. And so like it was bound to happen and I'm sorry it had to happen with you on the show, but
No, that's good luck. That's an old tried and true method right there to make sure we got it right.
I
It would be
like
weird
it.
if a Friday night didn't start like that.
It's kind of the way I roll. So thanks for rolling along with me. But I just want to tell everybody next week I'm having Tony Eccles from Bufora on, which will be really cool to speak with him and just get a little bit of his take as to how he sees things over here in the United States. Because, Steve, as you know, we've had quite the exciting turn of events or pathetic turn of events as of late in the UFO world. And so I want to, first of all, for people who don't know you and follow you on Twitter, give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, sure. I've had a varying level of interest in the topic um, since the 1990s, really, when I had a sighting of my own. And I kind of came back to it in full force in 2017 after the New York Times article came out and TTSA and all that stuff. Thinking, maybe now I can really get some answers or find a little more information on maybe what I had seen or what's, the truth to all this stuff is, all these stories and allegations. As I, dove in deeper and deeper, my opinion has certainly changed on that. But I definitely still enjoy researching the topic. It's been a big part of my life since I was younger, and I even as a kid laid awake listening to Art Bell most nights. And it definitely has a place in my heart. But unfortunately, when you get down to brass tacks, which is really what I came here to do in 2017, was to really see what the verifiable facts say, what the evidence points to. And unfortunately, everything points to unsubstantiation and a lot of unclarity, unfortunately. So I guess I've developed into a skeptic. Something that I certainly wouldn't have thought as a kid that I would be saying, 25 years later. I can remember the gut reactions I would get from seeing skeptics on popular documentaries or TV shows. And it's funny to years later find myself kind of filling that role a little bit. But yeah, I do take a skeptical approach to the topic these days, and I try and put verifiable evidence and the accepted standard of evidence as defined by the professional research community. I try and put that foremost in my research moving forward. So
And
yeah, that's
that's, I
where I'm
think,
kind of at.
I think that's one of the reasons that like I was just drawn to you because I watch your Twitter posts, read your Twitter posts, and you have, you've been through the journey like most of us listening to the show, like I have. And it has been, it kind of takes the wind out of your sails sometimes when you are, "Oh, yes, this is so cool. And we're going on this journey together. And there's this potential for this wonderful thing to happen that could change, our reality." And then you just find out through personal experiences or through research that there really is, as of yet, nothing tangible to the subject. And that is, it's disappointing, but I kind of hope in some way we can find power, empower ourselves in that knowledge.
No, absolutely. I love that. Really coming back and taking a second look at the topic, a little wiser, maybe a little more educated, and just really looking at it deeper, this time around, and not just kind of sucking up the things that are on the surface at the popular level and taking them at face value, but really going deeper. Um, the the experience, and the lessons learned has really helped me to better discern information in all aspects of my life, and it's funny because I don't think I realized even as a grown adult, fairly educated, how low my level of discernment was for some things, and it's not because I'm deficient in some way. It's just because I'm a human being. And I have, biases and beliefs and things that I would like to be true. And if I'm just going to research by way of, gut feeling, or who I think is telling the truth, or what claims I believe are true, or who I think is a liar, then that's just a very, through that subjectivity, there's all kinds of instances where my human fallibility can come into play. And that's why the standard of evidence that, you and Jack talk about so often is so important. And it's again, not because we're deficient, but simply because all humans are fallible in that way, and this is to safeguard us from allowing those, whether we realize it or not, those biases to come into play as we're trying to discern what the facts are.
Absolutely, that is so eloquently put, and I think it is. And Steve's Aquatics is in chat, and I just want to say, read his comment. It's okay to be skeptical, but do you have an open mind on the subject? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Steve. Yeah, it's subjective, of course, but yeah, I think I have an open mind. In fact, I would argue that my mind is more open than it was before. And I think that my view is that a lot of skeptics have an open mind. And in fact, a lot of them didn't start out as skeptics, but they started out as believers, or people that were very interested in the topic at that level. But I think that, that term open-minded can get, used in a way that really, instead of open-minded, I feel like it's more irresponsibility when it comes to when we're, it's one thing. I love to talk about the topic and, the possibilities and what could be. And I could have conversations about the possibilities of the universe forever. But, what I'm specifically interested in, and what I do on Twitter and this topic is looking at it from a very objective point of view. And in that way, my mind remains open to all the possibilities. And again, I try to consider, probability over possibility as I'm doing my research, and I'm not trying to be closed-minded, but as a fallible human being, I certainly can be closed-minded to things. Again, which is where the standard of evidence and the methods, the scientific method is so important, to keep us all grounded. So I don't think that I'm closed-minded, but in fact, I think that skeptics are even more open-minded than people realize. And we're not we're not closed to the claims that people make. And we're not judging them on that level. We're simply interested in what the verifiable evidence can point to, so that we can better discern what the highest probability of answer is.
Right. I mean,
according to the verifiable facts.
Right. Thank you. You just nailed it out of the park. And I want to just read what Scott says. Skeptical just means evidence-based. There are, we could go back and forth about like the different meanings of skeptics and true believers and different things. I don't think I am skeptical of the claims I have heard from the people that are forefront in the subject. And as of now, nobody after how many decades has proven to me that there is anything here. Heshtalin was a wonderful thing. My mind is open to possibilities. I have had interesting experiences in my own life, and I think that's one thing that keeps me pursuing the truth. And then kind of going through, like I say this on my shows, but like it's almost a shamanic dismemberment of sorts, because you come in and you find that you're disillusioned and you're just, disheartened and things. And then you start to put the pieces back together, and it becomes more of, okay, now I see through this. I see how many people, or how few people, the same handful of people that have been corrupting the community for decade after decade for their own purposes. We're not quite sure what those are at the moment, but we can see that group. I think a prime example is what has been happening with Skinwalker Ranch, and now the new UFO whistleblower, who was thoroughly been, in my opinion, that whole thing has been discredited. You can look at the article that Forbes magazine came out with, and this has received scrutiny from a lot of different places. You've got somebody who's coming out, and I can go back, here and show some of these crazy covers. I mean, here we've got, he shows where NASA has hidden the bodies. I mean, Okay, how did that work out for you? Or, here we've got this with the Pentagon, shocking Pentagon official, and the day after Roswell, how did that work out for him? And then we've also got sworn affidavits, claims Air Force guardsmen remains of crashed saucer and dead occupants. Let's see, what was that year? July 78. So it's like we keep having people who are, okay, maybe, have military backgrounds, who have law enforcement backgrounds, who are engineers, whatever, who have backgrounds that in some likelihood can be, inflated, like, some people do when they're doing the job applications. But just because somebody has been in the service does not make them a credible witness. That doesn't mean that are privy to everything. Security clearances, we could do a whole show on security clearances, but people have to start using that discernment, like you talk about. That's really critical. Ask questions. Okay, this guy's Ross Coulthart, this renowned journalist, according to him, is putting forward this fellow who is saying, he saw the pictures, he saw A, B, C, and D, but yet, there's nothing. There is nothing.
Right.
In fact, there's even less of nothing than there's been in other cases of alleged whistleblowers. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
No, and that's a great point. Anything that we're seeing, nothing new. There's nothing new. It's all stuff that we've been through before. And even the reporters that are presenting David Grusch are really, admitting that these are things that people have been saying for years. They actually use that to help bolster the claims that these are things that people have been saying for a long time, so they must be true. But these are tropes that we've been through before. They're things that have been floating in the community for a long time, and I haven't heard David Grusch say anything that he couldn't have pulled from any of the stories that we heard over the last 5 years, or just from looking at the topic's history, and certainly couldn't have heard from some of the very same ex-government people that we've been hearing those claims and stories from. And I think that, again, you touched on, the argument of authority. It's like the foundation of the topic. It's at the core of every claim, because essentially we don't ever have strong evidence to support and substantiate these claimants and their claims. So what it comes down to is the fallacy of the argument from authority. This is a credentialed person. This is an educated person. This is someone who had access and would know. They have a security clearance and they wouldn't lie. And all these things are, again, false fallacies, as according to arguments. They're argumentative fallacies, and are only, again, they don't give us any objective hard evidence to support the claim. It's just saying that we should, because he's a respected person. And again, if David Grusch was saying that he took his trash out and then came back in the house and watched TV, like, I wouldn't just probably question anything that he said. But when people are presenting us with claims that are extremely sensational and wild and go against everything that's proven as far as science is concerned, we should only take a skeptical approach to that. I think that there's a lot of gray area that's exploited in the topic. And, you were talking about security clearances. Who just knows about security clearances and the ins and outs of them, and what, how long they last or have to get renewed, or what can get them revoked, or, just like who knows about just that one specific thing. Most people don't know about that are just in everyday life and are interested in the UFO topic. And so that gray area is exploited because people aren't familiar with that. And that's done throughout, pretty much all levels of the argument. And when they present these claims, there's always those gray areas that are just full of them that are exploited. And again, it's nothing new. We can go back to all the way 1956 and, Edward Vrupel in his 1956 book. The guy that went on he was studying UFOs for the government for 20 years, essentially, and went on to do Blue Book. There was an excerpt that Kurt Collins had wrote about a couple of years ago in his blog. And it was an excerpt that didn't make it into the book, but I thought that it really encapsulated what the UFO topic has become. But not only that, it's what it was all the way back in 1956. And Ruppelt goes on to say, essentially as far back as anyone can remember, the United States government has made it a matter of course to not comment on private citizens, what they say, what they do. It's just not what's done. And when people retire from the government, they are private citizens again. And he goes on to explain that, that alone is exploited by these people, by their claims and by their allegations, because essentially the name of the game is present an unsubstantiated claim or allegation and dare the government to refute you or to disprove you. And when the government doesn't do that, which why would it? Because it's not in the business of doing that, and it goes against the typical standard operating procedures. When the government does not refute their claims, they then can hail that as validation for the truthfulness and the veracity of what they've presented. And again, that's a gray area. A lot of people I can see where that would be an enticing argument, if you're not familiar with how the government operates. And I mean, you can work in government for 20 years and still not know everything about how the government operates or every little facet. So this is a topic, unfortunately, that just requires a lot of research and education on the most minute and obscure things to try and get an understanding of just what's going on. It really is a multifaceted topic. And again, most people that are interested in UFOs and are giving weight to people that have credentials and degrees and government positions, and they're giving weight to the things that they say, because in normal life you often do that, and again, it's just another aspect that's exploited, and it's a shame. Now, I'll stop there.
No, I was kind of liking where you were going, but it is sad. I mean, I've learned quite a bit about security clearances over the past few years, and was married to somebody that had a secret clearance and all sorts of things. And you don't have access, like you say, to everything. That's absolutely ridiculous. And I also wanted to stress the fact that, here you've got, we just saw the news today where the Air National Guardsman was, charged with, he was stealing top secret documents and then putting them out in different chat groups. And so it's like, you look at people like Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp and all these people who are saying they've got these top secret, these leaked documents and things. And then you have to just go back to them and say, seriously, you would go to prison if that was the case. Oh, and hang on. Can you talk for 1 second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, I'll expand on the point that you're making there, and because it is a good one. We do see people in life and kids that leak stuff online, and even just the most minute threats to national security and classified information are generally swiftly dealt with and prosecuted, even if just to serve as a deterrent against any type of future activity like that. And the fact that people like Jeremy Corbell and Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo have not apparently faced any type of retribution for leaking stuff, repetitively, is definitely interesting. It's definitely goes against what's usual and what you would expect, I would think. Again, it's a gray area, though. How much of us are really familiar? We can say what's typical, and it does stand out that they haven't been prosecuted at all. But just to get into the classified, stuff that, the non-classified stuff David Grusch is presenting, it isn't classified, the stuff that he's saying. So that in itself should suggest to us that what he's saying, it probably isn't true, because if it was true, information of that level, which he's presenting, would certainly be classified, you would think, at the highest levels. And the fact that, Dobser, the government approved him to come out and make these comments and statements, and they were okay with it, certainly suggests that the information is not classified and not true. And there's a lot of gray area in that's being often exploited again by, the reporters like Keen and Blumenthal and anyone else that's trying to promote this story. They promote that gray area of, as if what he's saying is true, it is true and it's happening, but it's not classified, so he can talk about it. And that's just not the case. And even if it was, a little bit classified, tiny, he couldn't, you can't talk about things that are classified at all. You can't just share some details on them. You can't talk about the nature of it, but just don't give away the names. You can't talk about any of it. And again, all these things are kind of gray areas that are exploited because the claims and the allegations are presented in a way that is very convincing. It's done through, high level media, we could say, and it's coming from people that have, like we said, credentials and authority and positions to know. So why would they lie? As if the only options are he's telling the truth or lying, and there's nothing in between. And we know that's just not how life works. Yeah.
And thank you for saying that. I mean, it's just, I think the recent news, like I said, it's just, look at what's happening. There are safeguards in place, hopefully, that protects, people from leaks that could damage our national security. And I think it's really interesting when I'm looking at some of the people now, the people who've been front and center in the UFO subject for a long, long time, I look at some of their rhetoric, especially now, their vitriolic, the way that they're kind of light the pitchforks. We are going to storm the Capitol. We are going to weaponize your curiosity. It's all about, making some of these statements. And Stephen Greer, I guess, popped off the other day and was saying things that, I mean, it's inciting people to violence. Let's just be real. Some of the, Chris Leto and his debacle this week about, going on about the interview. And I will say that I hope he is okay, because it didn't seem like he was okay in that interview or that he did his show. But some of the wording that was used, and we see this time and time again. I mean, people are now doing things that are absolutely discrediting the subject, and these are the people that are supposed to be promoting disclosure, but they're not. They're calling on us to distrust the government and to rise up, and it is dangerous, and I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I there's no two ways about that. And people could say you're making a mountain out of a molehill, but we've seen how, small things that we would never think would happen can grow into, real problems. And a lot of it is often based on, information and the coalition and weaponizing of small groups of people, sometimes large groups of people. And it's funny that in the age that we live in, so many people seem to be aware of this. Whether, from one political party or the other, or just, the nature of influencing and entertainment. And but for some reason, when it comes to the UFO topic, none of that seems to apply. And that's that seems to be a pattern. Same thing with, whatever your politics may be, or the politicians that you support or think are, terrible and shouldn't be in office. If they're supporting a UFO topic, that can suddenly go out the window. And yeah, it is a shame. It really is. And I there's a lot of responsibility that's just shirked, unfortunately. And that's, where people like you and Jack and others come in and try to apply accountability to people who have made very, public comments and things that affect other people and groups of people. Because there really isn't. I had put up a tweet the other day just kind of as a laugh, but it's so true. You have all these people essentially just saying, like, look, I don't, do I know what the truth is? No, like, I'm just reporting what they tell me. You have Keen saying that, and the debrief saying that, and just everybody, I'm just Knapp and Corbell, we're just reporting what they tell us. That's what we do. We're journalists and reporters. Yeah. And that's a complete misrepresentation of what they should be doing, which is verifying and vetting and letting us know what part of the information could be substantiated, which part of it couldn't be substantiated. Instead of just presenting unsubstantiated, substantiated, whatever, all together as one, and then no one can really tell what's what. And it's done a lot, even just looking at Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean in recent interviews. There's always like this dichotomy of what they go on to say, and they're very deceptive. They'll be talking about Grusch, and they'll say, and we did vet him. Well, we didn't vet him, but we talked to other people who said that he did have the credentials but people, the way they talk, people lose that he did say we didn't vet him, but people are hearing what he's saying after that. But we talked to people who said that he's very credible. He held the positions that he did. And it's just like skipping over the fact that you did not vet him, and nothing he said essentially has been vetted, except for apparently, his career. That's a very common way of talking about the topic.
That's what a con artist does.
Whether or not the Washington Post passed on the story. Like the Washington Post didn't publish the story. They had it so long, and Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal admit that, there was nothing on the horizon as far as them publishing it. So they had to go with the debrief, for pressure, because this was a coordinated media release. There's other media people like Ross Coulthart and whatever, Channel 8 News. And there's other people that are involved in doing this story. And they have pieces that they've already worked up, and they're waiting to release it because, Kean and Blumenthal had to be the first ones to release it. Apparently that's the way David Grusch wanted it, which should stand out to me because we've seen that essentially they're doing a rerun of the 2017 story with Lou Elizondo. Mm-hmm. And we've seen over the years how incorrect that article was, and how many misstatements and misinterpretations there were. And more importantly, how often they simply accepted what they were told as factual truth without verifying it, only for us to find out that it was not factual truth. And they're, Leslie Kean herself has admitted that she's done this. Of course, she justifies lying or misrepresenting the facts in her articles. She justifies doing that by saying that it's, to get more widespread acceptance of UFOs, to not put, the craziest stuff out there and to turn people off. Again, like totally skipping over the fact that she left out facts in her story. She misrepresented facts in her story, and she did not vet the things that she claimed were facts in her story. Skipping right over that. We're seeing it again now with David Grusch, and he wanted these two authors, Kean and Blumenthal, to be the ones to debut the story. And to me, that just, again, seems very strange considering all the inaccuracies and red flags that we saw in their last story. But if I was somebody who wanted sympathetic reporting and saw that they were willing to put my story out there without vetting major elements of it, then that might be somebody that's appealing to me. Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal.
Luckily, you're not that kind of person. But and that's the thing. That's a pathetic excuse. You can't call yourself a journalist if that's your the way you're going to say things, and to say that you're trying to get more acceptance for the subject. You don't do it by promoting crap. Come on. You do it by promoting the truth. You do it by promoting facts, evidence-based research. Clearly, I don't think, probably either of those two has ever been about reporting facts. I think you can see with Leslie trying to backtrack after the interviews, and some of the criticism, the harsh and much needed criticism started coming out. It's like, okay, you can't backtrack. This is your track record. And you're not promoting good information, and you're hanging around the same people. Like you mentioned, the 2017 article, it's the same players, it's the same narrative. Here you've got another person with similar credentials to Elizondo and things coming forward with the story. And so I have to ask you, because this was actually brought up in chat earlier, but do you think that that Grusch is just like a fall guy straw man?
I don't know. Again, I don't know his heart, and I'm remaining open-minded to what the answer is. So I can only really list the possibilities in what I consider the terms of probability according to the facts. I don't know that he is willingly being part of some type of deceptive operation. I don't know if he's purposefully lying or inflating these claims, or if he truly believes them. I really don't. So all I can look at is what the verifiable information is. I haven't seen any thing that would be conclusive enough to suggest that he is purposefully deceiving us. Now, whether or not he believes in that stuff and he is being used by other people to further their goals, again, haven't seen hard evidence of that, but we can certainly say, because people have admitted it, that he's been being groomed and talked to about these things for a number of years, and he's being courted by many of the same figures, ex-government figures, UFO personalities. He's being courted by the same people that have been courting us for years and telling them the same stories they've been telling us. And there's plenty of people that have heard those stories over the last 5 years and took them at face value and believed them and believed the people who are giving them and telling the stories. And again, as we said before, just because somebody is a educated person that has a high-ranking government job or security clearance doesn't mean that they could be above levels of gullibility or fallibility or credulousness or even just having what some people would consider to be unusual beliefs, and it doesn't mean that they're above doing that simply because they're accredited and educated. And furthermore, it also, the government can't just fire somebody for having unusual beliefs or for being a gullible person. There's all kinds of safeguards to safeguard against that. Certainly, you would think in a position such as intelligence at the level that he was at, that if it was realized that he was gullible and credible and being taken at that level, or was willing to at least give into unfounded beliefs on that level, you would think that that would be recognized as something that would be detrimental to the intelligence community, and that they probably, although couldn't fire him, but you would think that they would probably do things to lessen his involvement and reach to information and his influence in things because of that. Not saying whether that's right or wrong, but certainly he is saying that he faced retribution. We haven't seen anything conclusive to solidify that. We have nothing to suggest that his security clearance was ever revoked. According to the document released by Grusch and his team of lawyers, his security clearance remained, he remains security cleared, although he did withstand some type of adverse effects, but it didn't seem like he received any type of real retribution for his beliefs, or it didn't seem like he received any retribution, anything more than some decisions that he might not have agreed with, or not having certain access, or having certain things that he wanted heard or given weight to. It seems like that was kind of the extent of it so far that we can see. And you would expect that would probably be the outcome. And I would probably think, we've seen many of the people from the UAPTF are now, out of government and have, according to them, retired and gone into the private sector. I would probably wager to guess that those people also probably were, froze out or faced some type of, lessening in their credibility standing in the IC community, the intelligence community, because of the inept, incredulous nature of the UAPTF. And when it was superseded by Arrow, it seems like most of these people moved on and retired. And for Grusch, he's only 36 years old, so that's kind of unusual, But again, there's nothing to suggest that he faced some type of harsh retribution or had his security clearance revoked simply for having a belief in stories of UFOs and aliens. There's nothing to suggest that. Nor for, talking about it or bringing up his concerns about that to the proper channels. We have nothing to suggest that he faced actual retribution on paper in any way.
Right. That's a great point. And I think it is interesting to see the stories he's coming out with. I mean, we've seen this story, as I pointed to, magazine after magazine after magazine, the same stuff. And this is the same stuff that, Eric Davis has been, filling people's heads, full of, and that whole crowd, Kit Green and the, the Bigelow boys. I mean, that's been their MO Hal put off for a long, long time. And so you do hear, and I know that Jack Brewer posted some things about, the okay, here we've got the same group of people steering the narrative, saying the same stories, and here we've got another person who is either a willing or unwilling, unwitting person that is promoting their narrative. And I mean, this is I you feel bad for a person if they've been duped and in such a public way. But I guess we'll just wait and see how this plays out. At the end of the day, Elizondo hasn't really come up with anything other than creating a group of bullies online to try to harass other people. But it's like, great, good job, Elizondo.
Yeah, no, and that's a really great point. What has been accomplished since 2017, other than media stories and entertainment programs and people making profit, and what information have we received as part of this push towards disclosure? What progress has been made towards that? People point to the hearings in Congress and the offices created in the government, but they certainly don't have to represent any progress towards us receiving any type of information about the reality of a UFO cover-up. There's nothing and even further, we have people, especially like John Greenwald, that day in and day out are the ones that are trying through FOIA to get this type of information, and we've heard from people like him that it's only become harder to get UAP related information, that it's only become more classified and more sensitive, and in reversal of the claims that are being made that we're on to some march towards transparency and a disclosure of information. We're having the exact opposite of that in truth from everything we can see, to the point where even all UAP imagery is just blanket classified. It's not going to be released, and not with having sensitive information edited out of the video and released. They've really tightened the reins around any type of UFO information. They're giving a lot of blanket B7 exemptions, FOIA exemptions, for a lot of requests. Greenwald's received a bunch. I've received one in regards to Lou Elizondo's IG complaint. And there's just a real tightening of information going on. Requests being closed with vague promises of information being posted on websites, and then that never happening, but the request is now already closed. So yeah, and I don't know. We could speculate on why, but certainly if we go back 5 years and rewind the tape and play it back forward, I could understand that suddenly, with an influx of people and an influx of media and attention on UAP, I could see the government tightening the reins on that, especially because UAP, according to the government, generally means drones, balloons, stuff that is not ET, is not alien. That's not what UAP means to them generally. And there's all kinds of information that we as average taxpayers just simply can't know for reasons of national security. I don't think that a lot of people realize that what the government allows the American public to know, they allow the adversaries and enemies of America to know as well.
Right.
There is no real line of delineation there, and we have to accept that and know that. Yeah, I definitely, as far as the push towards disclosure, we're not seeing that any type of disclosure is coming, nor have we ever when claims of that have been made. But I definitely want to stress to people that the information has only become more restricted, and that should really be noted.
And I think when you've got a group on UFO Twitter that behaves the way they do, and they're posting things that are, I mean, really reprehensible, and you've got people like Kirkpatrick, who is, all of the people that were at the NASA conference. They, in speaking about this subject, were harassed. And you can only imagine what Sue Goff has been through. I'm sure that she's been harassed and threatened. And I think that's really unfortunate. So, to all the people who are, we're going to light your pitchforks again and harass people who are trying to get factual evidence to put out to the public, and you behave like this, what do you think is going to happen? And then that asks, I have to ask the bigger question. Perhaps UFO disclosure isn't their point at all. Perhaps it is creating an unease with our political system and making us question, our leadership and things. Which I think it's a very dangerous thing. I know I've had Dave Troy on the show, thanks to Jack Brewer, a few weeks back, and I love, if you guys can follow him on Twitter, reading his posts, because the guy, this is what he studies. And it is really important to understand when you see groups of people that are continually working with each other, and here you've got Joe Rogan, and here you've got Bob Lazar, and here you've got Bob Bigelow, and here you've got, the same, group of people promoting a specific message, and on different platforms or coast to coast with Alex Jones and some of these characters. It's like, come on now, people, use your brains and listen to what is being said. Look at the imagery, like with Lou Elizondo. Look at the imagery behind him. I mean, you can do research on this. It's not real hard to find out specific visual cues, specific wording that are dog whistles for specific groups of people. And I think we need to be more adept at that and get a clue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, what a shame, like UFO Twitter was mentioned by NASA representatives, right? And what was it mentioned for? For trolling them and, issuing misogynistic threats and tweets. And I'm sure that was probably a small percentage of the UFO Twitter people that did that. I'm not saying it was everybody. But that's just an kind of an offshoot of the entire brand that the UFO influencers, the biggest names in the topic, and the influencers under them, their fans, are pushing. And it's a very us versus them. It's a very white hat on a championship ride to righteousness kind of thing. And it's a shame because it first of all, we talk about this stigma in the topic of, like, that's the stigma right there. NASA looking and saying, well, like, what, that's the way we're being treated for looking into the topic, like, because we're not reinforcing the beliefs that you have, right? The beliefs. And it really is, it is a shame. And it's the stigma, as far as I'm concerned, there is, stigma having to do with UFOs, but for the most part, anybody that's alive today has pretty much grown up in the same UFO type of media culture I have, and are probably at least open-minded to, life living elsewhere in the universe. And they understand that there's been a lot of reports of UFOs and people believe in them. And I don't think that anybody out there is really persecuting or stonewalling anybody with UFO stories. I mean, look at all the stories that have been published just in the last 5 years alone. And then all the years before that, the culture is definitely accepting of UFOs. Unfortunately, the UFO culture is not accepting of anyone that's not willing to promote the narratives and the narrators within the culture. Anyone that throws any type of signs of threat or any type of questioning or scrutiny towards those narratives or narrators is seen as the enemy. And that's a shame, because those narratives and narrators should be scrutinized. They're not proven. They lack evidence, and they're calling on us and courting us to support them and to do things on behalf of them, including enact legislation in Congress and have hearings and spend lots of taxpayer money and do all kinds of things. That we should be scrutinizing these things and making sure that we are that what they're saying is truthful, can be proven, and that we're making the right decisions. But from the very get-go, that attitude is froze out. And whether it's through people, big names in the topic like Gary Nolan and others just simply blocking anybody that's going to pose any type of threat or questions or scrutiny to them, simply blocking them from the conversation. That's one of the biggest ways that most of these people keep that community tied to their message and not against it. They want your curiosity weaponized, but they do not want your curiosity weaponized against them. And that's a shame. It really is. It's nothing new. But I definitely want to stress that everything needs to be verified. And no matter who it is, it doesn't matter if it's me or the president of the United States or anybody. If they're going to say something that is really outside of the scope of what should be considered typical and usual, you need to verify it, especially when we get to the point that we're at now, where we really are we're doing congressional legislations, we're spending taxpayer money and stuff, and this certainly isn't going to end well if they cannot substantiate these claims at all, you know. And of course, I think Mick West has really done a good job about talking about, you know, what probably will, you know, happen in the future is that, you know, Congress is looking into it and they're, you know, going to be informed on the levels that they're allowed to as to, you know, what's going on. And most of the times it's, you know, sensor anomalies and balloons, and there's things that they feel need to be addressed, but they're probably not going to be assured that we have any type of ET crashes or ET bodies or anything like that. And of course, what they're told is going to be highly classified, most likely, because they're going to be wanting to hopefully be given substantiation for the things that the people within the government are telling them to prove to them that, you know, we don't have ET crashes, we don't have ET bodies. And that's going to require classified information, undoubtedly, which means that we're not going to get to hear it. And this is a cycle that's repeated many times over. And essentially, the UFO community calls it a cover-up, right? Because the truth that they are convinced is the truth was not released. And the cover-up and the whitewash has only continued. And, you know, the congressmen were froze out, and Arrow is just a big whitewash like Blue Book, and just the typical excuses that really the topic and industry leaders and most popular names are going to pitch first, but they don't really have to. It's already ingrained in the community. It's already happening now. And that is the cycle. Unfortunately, again, it goes back to a real lack of responsibility and a lack of accountability. Because if people aren't accountable for what they tell you or for what they allege, and they throw that responsibility and accountability onto somebody else, usually the U.S. government, they have no responsibility, and they can continue to keep going and keep fighting the fight for UFO information disclosure. And meanwhile, none of that ever comes to fruition, but plenty of people have made money or attempted to make money or have, you know, had all kinds of opportunities come along the way because of that, on the backs of people who literally believe what they're being told and have had probably experiences and have had things that have led them to be predisposed to believing these types of stories. It's a shame.
I know it is a shame, and thank you. You make some great points. And I want to just read some comments here really quickly. So Gracie's saying, you know, if public money is spent, scrutiny is important. And I think, you know, it would be interesting to find out if there is an investigation with regard to the 22 million that was spent on absolutely nothing. That's certainly a good example of taxpayer waste. But, you know, we could look into that. And anyway, I want to just thank, I've got some new people in Matthew Riot is in here. And I also want to say hi to Steve from Truth Seekers really quickly. He did a great show with Jack a couple nights ago. And so get in there and watch that show. Jack just tore it up. He was amazing. So really cool show. But in Lord Ludacris, I want to go back to what Lord Ludacris was saying is, you know, he was talking about Brandon Fugel, the alleged owner of Skinwalker Ranch. But he was just saying, didn't Fugel call the same skeptics, pigs and filthy swine. And yes, he did. Here you've got an alleged really, top businessman who's behaving like a 2-year-old in a sandbox. But yes, he did. And that is, again, just not something that you would expect from somebody in that position. And so, like you mentioned, we have, we look to these people in positions of authority, and none of these people in those positions of authority is leading us in a direction where we are doing things ethically, where we are not harassing and bullying people, where we are actually looking at good research. And I think that's why this subject has been such a clown show since its inception. We haven't had strong leaders. We haven't had people that have said, hey, wait a minute, here we've got back in the 70s, we've got NICAP selling the email list to a Nazi up in Canada, but hey, we're not going to talk about that. Not once, but twice that happened. We're not going to talk about some of these things that are actually really important. We're just going to blow it off and then go back to looking for the one UFO case that is going to make a difference. I mean, there are ways that people who are who have been in this subject for a long time, and they've done wonderful work, and I love them very, very dearly. But there are ways that the field could have maybe been changed for the better had we not allowed this kind of crap. And I know Barry Greenwood's been incredible. You've heard him on my show many times talking about MJ12, which is, again, just the same old story that we're hearing. We keep getting it's regurgitated by the same group of clowns, but so people do try to stand up, and then people like Barry eventually get kind of discouraged, and they go do it. They keep doing their own work behind the scenes to help preserve history and share that with people. But it's just unfortunate, and it's like I remember having a conversation with Richard Dolan, with Nick Redfern, with everybody that was somebody in the public spotlight. And it's like, okay, you guys, what are we doing? What are we doing when people are being harassed? What are we doing when people are promoting absolute crap? And it was just like, well, nothing, because it's the way it's always going to be. And if that is your excuse for not being accountable and for not being a community member that wants the best for the community, then there's a problem there. And we shouldn't be looking. And I'm Nick is a friend, and I'm not bagging on Nick because we've had conversations and I've asked him this on my show before. But mostly, I guess I'm bagging on Richard Dolan. But you've got, it's like, okay, what are you guys doing? It's sad, and we shouldn't be holding those people in high regard. Especially the Greers and people like that. And luckily, I think everybody here that listens to my show understands that. Everybody that reads Jack's blog, everybody that follows you on Twitter, I think we all have the same idea and understanding and the same hope for the subject, and especially for people who have the yearning to get involved in this, people that have potentially seen something, people that just want to expand their education. We should have a safe place for people to do this, and nobody's created that yet. And maybe someday that can happen.
No, that's great points, Erica. Really, and I love what you said. What could have been. What could have been if we had better community leaders and community stores of good information and good community standards. And it's never too late, of course. But unfortunately, we're always putting on the pedestal people who have no interest in doing that. And there's certainly, I give a lot of kudos and appreciation and respect to people that do continue to stick with the topic, year after year, decade after decade, doing research pretty much, in in obscurity. And really sticking there. And we have people that have lifetimes worth of experience and knowledge about the topic. You bring up Barry Greenwood. You couldn't ask for somebody that been doing it since the 60s, and Robert Schaefer. And, these are people that, were educated by Hynek, were, in college under him. And have been following the topic and doing the research for decades and have seen the cycles and have retained all the information. And these are just indispensable sources of insight and information as far as the topic then and now. And what we're looking at and dealing with now and trying to understand that. And unfortunately, those types of voices are just not given any type of platform. And again, because a lot of the topic, the industry, really, it's a UFO industry, is just not interested in that. They're interested in business. This is a business. It's about, profitability. And for some people, it's about other things too. And of course, there's always ego and stuff. But ultimately, for most, it's a business. And I mean, most people are independently wealthy. You can't just devote your life to doing anything if it's not going to be profitable. And unfortunately, there's just no profitability historically in skepticism or measured, balanced assessments based upon the facts. It's just not what sells. It's not what's sexy. It's not sensational. So unfortunately, the market, it really lends itself to the sensationalism more so than the studious. But really, I do again, and for people that have, you and Jack and Barry Greenwood and just so many people that have stuck with it and keep doing this year after year. Kirk Collins, there's just there's so much good information out there, and it took me a while to get to it because it does. The stuff that's on the top that's easy to locate is very superficial, and the stuff that really has the substance, the stuff that people who are citing their evidence, and unfortunately they're not, their message is critical of the popular message, and it's just really hard to find that information. In fact, when I found your show, that was one of the things that struck me about it. It was, a year or two after, probably about a year after I came back into the topic full force. And I was, really trying to find more, deep diving stuff of substance. And I came across your show, and it was just a library full of amazing interviews with people who were really substantiating what they had to say. And they were really getting into specifics about what the facts were. And I just want to thank you for that. And you've led me to, a bunch of other great researchers I've in turn learned from. And, I've gone on to, have conversations with and ask, their, advice and their recollections and stuff. And it's nice that there are people who really are just looking for what the verifiable facts are and what they possibly point to. And, unfortunately, they're just the butt of a lot of community hatred and trolling, and they're really singled out. And oftentimes, even myself, am accused of being, a paid government, skeptic here to sink the topic and stuff. And it's just there's just so much to put up with that you can understand why most people, once they get to the point, and it takes some time, but once they get to the point where they start realizing all the red flags and the inconsistencies. And the fact that many of these things are propped up on stilts that just don't match what the facts are, you can understand why a lot of them would then move on to do something else. It certainly is understandable. So again, for those of you that don't and that stick around, those of us that are really trying to get a handle, you're indispensable to us. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that means a lot to me. And I think it's, for me, I've never, obviously I don't care like how many, this sounds bad, how many views I get. It's the quality of the views. It's the quality of the people that's listening to the information. And so, that's why, again, like I just gravitated towards you as well, because you're thoughtful, you're dedicated, you're willing to put in work, and you're grounded. And I think that is so, for me, when it's like, oh, I just want to throw in the towel and walk away because, how much abuse can I take? But then I find people like you out there in the community, and I think, okay, this is why I'm sticking with it, because there are people like you. There are people, everybody in chat who is willing to understand and do the work and to stand together. And I think that's very powerful and so great. I've got, 600 views. Those are 600 views of people that I care about reaching. And I will say, I know that there's some people that are watching the show every weekend that, you know, that should have, multi-billion dollar, estates to worry about. But, so it's interesting. But I don't know.
No, it is. It is nice, and because there unfortunately there are two different types of conversations happening in this topic, right? And one is well, it's very belief based, and it's based in the possibilities and speculations and desires and the popular messages. But there's another conversation that's going on that we've been talking about that's based upon what the facts are and the proper methods and standards. And most of us, it's unfortunately those two conversations are just not compatible often, and more often than not. Not until someone is willing to become a little more skeptical, because there's just so much I think emotion and just personal stuff wrapped up in the believing part of this, and there's definitely two different conversations going on, but it's nice, and that it, at least from that end, that there's people, like you said, to talk to and to be able to bounce ideas off of. There are a lot of them that are out there in the topic, that are sticking around, and it really is. You can understand when people have been through, because this is a journey. We didn't all just start out as skeptical people researching the topic as the way that we are now. It was a journey to get there, and there's certainly a relation, I think, that we have between us, all of us, having gone through that kind of journey, or that metamorphosis, or whatever, having really opened our minds truly to the possibilities, and not just the possibilities we want or feel or think are the best, based on a gut level. And it's yeah, I forgot what I was going to say, but
I liked where you were going.
it is
You were
very
taking me
nice.
there.
And I don't know. I would love to spread the message. Geez, I don't know how to put this. I can only imagine, for instance, if it wasn't for certain people that had taken the time and the effort to put good information out there, people like you and Jack, despite the negative consequences they may get socially, or the time that it may take up in their personal life, or whatever. Despite those things, they were willing to put the effort out there. And if it wasn't for people like that, if nobody did that, who knows where many of us would still be. I know myself, I'd probably still be far down the UFO rabbit hole, if it wasn't for some people. And it's not like you don't suddenly become skeptical overnight. There's certain things that just start to weigh a little more, red flags heavily on you. And it's a process. And I think that there's certainly a camaraderie having gone through that process. But more importantly, I don't really see many negative people inside the skeptical community, at least outwardly. For instance, you can go on to Mick West's feed right now, and he's probably being just a stand-up English gentleman, nice as can be, in the face of all kinds of just mean, hurtful, prodding tweets, and I just really think that there's something to be said for the skeptical community that a lot of people just don't know, and they have a complete wrong, I think, conception of what a lot of skeptics are, what they believe, and what their history is.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting, and I've had Robert Schaefer. You mentioned Robert before. He's been on the show several times, and I talked to him a couple weeks ago. I like Robert a lot. There are, again, on both sides, I think, of the coin, there are good people to hang your hat on and bad people to hang your hat on. I am definitely not a big fan of Michael Shermer. I don't understand where he is coming from, and he's got some interesting things going on. Anyway, you can look into his background a little bit more, but I don't he's not my bag in the skeptical community. But there are people like, I mean, Robert, even though we disagree on things, that I enjoy talking to, and I appreciate what he's done. He always makes me, I would run into him at MUFON conferences or different, conferences I was going to, and I always like gravitated towards him because he was like sitting in the corner and he's just looking at people and taking notes and, all of this stuff. And I just, I remember hanging out with him and having a glass of wine and just talking and just enjoying like every moment. Every time we're around each other, it's like we just laugh. It's fun. And so there are some really fascinating people. And Robert's also been, I'm finding pictures of him, on stage at different conferences decade after decade, which is interesting because, you were saying that there isn't a lot of room for skeptics on the stage, but yet every once in a while, somebody like Robert or Phil Klass is on the stage at some of these conferences. But
Yeah, especially I think more so in the past.
yeah,
There
right,
certainly
right.
was more representation, I think, of the skeptical element within the topic, and more opportunities to represent that. And I think there was just more open discussion in general and debate amongst the leading figures of the topic, and yeah, I would like to see more of that. I would like to see people being more willing to have even a mediated debate or discussion, live, whatever, on live stream or in front of an audience, about what the facts are, and have each side present their argument. I think that a lot could be gained from that, but unfortunately, there's just not really anything to be gained for the people that are the popular voices in this community, that are the leading influential figures that are pushing narratives and claims, and essentially businesses. It doesn't serve them to do that. It's not necessary, and it can only really hurt them, and that's why I don't think we really see it too often. Now, I will say, in my own opinion, that certainly even back then, I think when you would see, and this isn't for everyone, but I think that there was certainly an entertainment factor to those discussions even back then, and that's fine. It doesn't have to cheapen it from the get-go. But a lot of times I'll see, for instance, the debate between Jeremy Corbell and Stanton Friedman about 10 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I was there for that one.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It's always brought up. And I think that Stanton certainly did a much better job of Jeremy Corbell, even just of being a decent human being on the stage. But it's always, when I see it like posted online, it's always kind of given the juxtaposition of like skeptic versus believer, and it just because Stanton Friedman and Jeremy Corbell disagreed on a few things, Stanton Friedman was not a skeptic. Like, he should be held up as the skeptical representation of the argument. That's certainly not it. So, but yeah, I would like to see more discussion. But unfortunately, it's just, like I said, these are two different conversations. And if everybody was really concerned about putting their evidence out there and having the preponderance of the evidence win the argument, they would do that. They're not willing to do that because they would lose every time. And so, again, two different conversations, two different conversations.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like you ask people, okay, here you've had this ranch for how long? And you said from the moment you bought the ranch, you would be open with data, and you'd be transparent, and anything but has happened. And it's like, you can't keep making these promises and then not holding up your end. And I mean, I guess you can, because clearly that's what's happening. But we see, and you bring up such a great point, it's like, okay, it's like, we'll just block you. If somebody asks a question that's critical, we'll just block you and call you a filthy swine.
Right.
And that really does speak volumes about the lack of evidence that is truly there. And I'm glad that people are starting to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to go back to that, like, it wasn't just Brandon Fugel that lashed out at skeptics. Also Tom Winterton did it. I mean, these are things that happen all the time, but to specifically, again, going, just because someone is not believing what you were saying and they're holding you accountable for your public statements, to go ahead and, call them names and to really just get really derogatory. And again, Mr. Fugel and Tom Winterton, they both apologized, but they did so, again, with a following qualifier of, apologizing, but then blaming, Stephen Greenstreet or the skeptics for getting them so worked up that they behaved in such a way, like blaming the victim of their despicableness for making them be despicable. Yeah.
I didn't realize that they actually came out with a public apology. Did Brandon come out with a public apology?
Yeah, well, this was on Twitter, for instance, with Stephen Greenstreet, when he did that. And I'm sorry, Tom Winterton also had words with Stephen Greenstreet, and I forget exactly what, but there was the words pig, swine. Oh, I'm sorry, and I'll use the word that he used, but he called him a douchebag, And then later, a few hours later, he erased his comments and kind of issued an apology, so to speak, again, for acting that way, but blaming Stephen Greenstreet for getting him so worked up that he would use that kind of language and stoop to that kind of behavior.
Right. I think anybody that knows now, anyway, anybody that knows in Utah probably understands is probably his character, I would say. But and the same thing with, I have, for a long time, I was nothing but supportive of all of that. And I really wanted to, like most people, wanted to believe that that was something that was exciting and something that, as a person in Utah, I could be, jump on board with, as a person who was excited about the the UFO question. It's like, I thought this was very cool. And I went down that rabbit hole, and through different interactions with that whole crowd over the years, I mean, it definitely exposed me to their real personalities, and that is really sad. I know some of the things that have been said about me by the minions or different things. Like I think most people that listen to the show understand that I was in a relationship where I was pretty severely abused physically and mentally at the hands of somebody who worked at Skinwalker Ranch, and to have people associated with Skinwalker Ranch say some of the things that they've said about me on social media is not only cruel, but it really speaks volumes of the lack of character that any of those people have. And I have invited, multiple times, hey, come on my show. We can talk about things. Let's do that in a public forum. But that isn't the avenue that any of these people choose to go. And again, that speaks volumes about that type of character. So
No, I agree, and it's the repeating theme of just a lack of transparency and accountability. And I do, a lot of us are familiar, with what you went through, and I can, only imagine, being in it to the level that you were and around the people that you were, and then starting to really see a lot of the signs and red flags, but having the social pressures of all kinds. And, Lou Jimenez talks about it, from UCR as well. And it is, it is a shame. And there, again, people are being weaponized. Our beliefs, our ideas, are being weaponized. We're being courted, and we should certainly try to fight against that. Now, and I'm sorry, you were just talking about Skinwalker Ranch and stuff. And as far as, again, transparency, that we've seen that from day one with the guys from Skinwalker Ranch. We can go back to the very first episodes of the very first season, where Tom Winterton was making claims about having suffered, some type of traumatic head trauma because of, digging on the ranch, because of the, curse of digging on the ranch, and that he, was hospitalized, and that he, the doctors were bewildered, but he doesn't present us with any of his medical records to prove that. He doesn't present us with any way of proving that these doctors were bewildered and that they presented the situation to him in the way that he presents it to us.
Well, I think that just the picture of him, from what I recall, his head's wrapped it with an ace bandage, and you show that to people that are actually medical professionals, and they're what? Okay, first of all, you know, medical professional, that's not the way you would treat an alleged injury like that. I mean, come on. And from what I understand, also the doctor that was looking at his injuries was Dr. Jim Segala. So I'm not quite sure how that plays into it. But it's ridiculous. And then you get people like Carl the Crusher, leaking or putting forward the medical report that was done by Colm Kelleher, which is just, a complete joke. And, I've got to just throw this out here because one of these days I'm seriously going to, and I keep threatening this, but just lay everything that I have out, my emails, my videos, my text messages, interviews, all this stuff, because it really is an important story that needs to be clearly disseminated to the public about the way, I was approached, about the things that I believed about people that walked into my business and basically leveled threats at me and my family, and did things that are absolutely mind-blowing. And so I hope to get that, I will put that out there one of these days. It's not going to be
Yeah.
a good look.
No, that if you choose to do that, I'm sure many of us will look forward to seeing that and to hearing about that. And I think that what we're seeing is that your situation there. This isn't an isolated incident, and that there's many people who feel that they've been taken advantage of or manipulated by leading figures in this industry. We have Jeremy McGowan talks about what he went through with Lou Elizondo and that crew. And I think that we've only heard just little mentions of it, really, or bits and pieces from people. And again, it's something that's very personal to them, I think, in a lot of instances. And I think that there's also a lot of social pressure to not be that person that most of the conversation is against. And I can understand all that. Who wouldn't be able to empathize with somebody in that position? I imagine that as more time passes, likely, and as certain leading figures, like whether it be Brandon Fugel and the Skinwalker team, or Lou Elizondo and that whole crew, I think as time passes, that we'll probably hear more, see more people willing to come out with, stories of their experiences where, they were manipulated and lied to or used in some way. And hopefully they'll present, verifiable evidence to substantiate their stories that these things happened, because they are important to the whole topic, as much as it's something personal for that person, and that's their decision. The whole topic could certainly benefit from those examples reaching the light of day and helping to give us clarity, because everything that we're presented is presented to us in a highly polished, highly controlled manner. Nothing is completely off the cuff and genuine. It's very professional, and it's media, it's entertainment, and helping us gain clarity and a better understanding of what really was going on behind the scenes. In just this few instances that we've seen stuff like that happen, for instance, with the Unidentified show on the History Channel, where Elizondo and DeLong, secretly recorded and then misrepresented meetings with government and ex-government officials, and then aired it on the History Channel. Just stuff like that. There's just so many stories that don't speak to a transparent, fully forward, open, and accountable nature that these narratives exist in. It's just, that's not the messages that we're often getting. And furthermore than that, we can just look at the narratives and the people themselves and just see that they're not being forward with us. They're not being transparent. And they're even admitting to that in most cases, but they're excusing it, by, well, I have to do it for this reason. Lou had to lie on those government documents and call, the Go Fast video balloons and drones. He had to do that because that's how he secreted them out of the government. If he put UFO craft on there, aliens, they wouldn't have approved it, and like, first of all, those things go against all kinds of critical thinking. But if we start allowing ourselves to excuse lies, misrepresentations, and inaccuracies based upon something, whatever, that we feel is justifiable for doing that, who knows how slippery the slope gets and the things that can be excused. And of course, we see it all the time. Everything that doesn't fit the narrative or support the narrators can be excused or massaged because it's all for a greater good. And that's just not, it's not the way it should be. It's not the way it's supposed to be. It's not the way we should be approaching the information that we're trying to discern. It's just not. And this isn't a conversation largely about, what the possibilities are and what, the nature of the universe is. And these are conversations that are very tangible. We're facing threats from unknown somethings from somewhere. And we need to do things about it in the military. We need to do things about it in Congress. We need to make taxpayer funding available for private industry and defense contractors. Like, these are very tangible things that are being based upon very intangible and subjective ideas. And I just think that the topic needs to get a little more real about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I even have to, I look at Project Galileo, and I look at some of the, you look at the people on that list of this research project, and you do have people like Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, and you think, okay, how can that be good to have those people on your list when you're trying to do scientific research? It's very interesting.
Especially when you said that project was going to be free of any type of government interference or involvement. Same thing was said for the Skinwalker Ranch people and for their investigation. And it turns out that they had Travis Taylor, involved the whole time. And here he is at the highest levels of, government and IC, UFO, UAP, whatever,
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I think my cat's over there. I think, Lewis is over there. So he's going to be coming over here at any point in time. It's exciting news for everybody.
That is one of the biggest cats I've ever seen.
He has a brother that is like super teeny. I don't know if like Sparta never really comes on the show, but that's okay. It's because
camera shy.
I think he is camera shy, and clearly Mufasa has no problem with that. But yeah, it is interesting to see. And I think here in Utah, especially with kind of the knowledge that I have, I mean, I've had a business here for almost 25 years, and I'm in the community. I've got a family who's always been very active in the community and doing things to make the world a better place. And it is, you have people that come in, and you understand, you have friends in the real estate community world and things like that. And you definitely understand that there are stories that have been put out to make people look better than they potentially are. And I think that the one thing I have to say is I've heard a lot of people excuse others' behavior because they're really nice to them. And so they're willing to, talk to them and give them a chance because this person is like giving them the keys to the kingdom. And I know that that's happened, with Eric Davis and multiple other people. It's like people are, excuse their behavior, even though they're clearly demonstrating that they're not good people, in my opinion. And so I think we need to stop some of that as well. It's like we shouldn't. I don't know. I mean, I've just been surprised at some of the people. Whoa, hang on, I've got to. I know this person has done A, B, C, and D, but I'm having a conversation with them tonight, and so, it's very interesting to me, and I think people need to get a grip.
And it's very human, right? It's very human for us to, most of us, to want to be nice people right? And to not want to make people uncomfortable or seem unwelcoming, and again, that's something that's exploited and capitalized upon by these people. Yeah, some of them are very, very good at doing it. We can take a look at Mr. Fugel, and again, I don't know him personally. I don't know his heart. And as a baseline starting point, I assume that everybody's, for the most part, a good person, right, and has good intentions, unless I see something that would lead me to think otherwise. Um, but certainly, we can look at the amount of time that he just spends on social media alone, right? And on Twitter and interacting with people. And I mean, a lot he does. And clearly, it's part of, in my mind, it must be, part of the business plan. And for a lot of people, somebody that has whatever 15 followers and lives in the middle of nowhere, or even, somebody that has lots of followers and lives in New York and they're a fan of the Skinwalker Ranch show. And, when he's engaging with you and talking to you, whether, you started out engaging him through praise or through questions and scrutiny, that can have an effect on you, and he approaches you nicely, and he's very polished in the way that he interacts online, and that can really have an effect on people, and can, that's the whole point, right?
Right.
And again, I just don't understand how the topic in as a whole just takes everything at face value. Of course I do, because we've talked about why it happens this whole show. It's something that certainly needs to be rectified. I don't have any expectation that it will, at least in my, personal opinion. I'd love to do anything I could to encourage more skepticism and critical thinking within the topic, and would love to see grifters not have such an easy time and an easy mark in this topic. But I don't expect to change, anybody's belief or change, any industries. Just trying to, go on my own journey through this and do it responsibly and transparently and with accountability, and trying to, in return, expecting it of myself, expecting it of others as well who make public claims and statements and assertions. And that's what I'd expect for myself too.
I love that. And that is just so genuine and so right on. And, I feel, I think all of us listening feel the same way. This is, for me, it's, as we know, it's been a trip, the whole thing. And I definitely have never made money doing this. I've lost money doing this quite a bit, but that's my thing. It's my passion. I love creating, having this archive that I can go to and just freaking geek out. It's such an honor for me to have, like, I'm sitting here and I've got Gordon Lore's, one of his boxes here, and just to see his handwriting and to smell, like, pick up the folder and you can just like smell, and it reminds me of being and this sounds kind of silly, but like just being in his home, and when you go to Anne Druffel's stuff, it's like you can just, there's something really special about having a person's work who's passed on, and knowing that you have the responsibility to take care of that and to preserve it and to get it out to the public. And I just think, I don't know, there's so many good things about the subject, or so many, as much as I've been through negative things, there are things like that just are very meaningful and uplifting, and I know can make a difference. And I really feel like you and me and Jack Brewer and the people listening, I think all of us, we're creating something. We're creating a pushback. We're creating accountability. We're creating a movement against, things that are not right. And I think that's powerful. And I have no doubt that we are not going to accomplish, that we will accomplish something very good. So,
I
Don
love it. I
Quixote.
love it, Erica. And you are accomplishing good things, especially with you and Jack are doing with expanding frontiers. Again, even if you're just reaching a couple people out of the masses, just a couple, you've reached me, and you helped me along in my journey, and you certainly, guys are certainly making a difference, for sure. And with what you're doing as an archivist, and that's again, carrying on and stewarding, that, being a steward of that information and that history that was really someone else's life, and sometimes I make the joke, one guy's UFO treasure is another widow's, trash,
It's pretty much the truth.
it is, it sure is. And for those of us that are into this and geek out on this and love this UFO stuff, that stuff's just like the bread and butter, you know what I mean? And it's great to save anything that we can. And a lot of these old archives and stuff, I mean, I'm sure these guys would have had, many of them, no idea that there would be people still 50, 60, 70 years later, going over these things and, dissecting them and using them to help understand what's going on now in more contemporaneous times, So yeah, thank you for your archiving, but just even for sharing your story and your journey, the good and the bad. I think that there was probably easily many points, but certainly a point that you probably got to where, the veil had kind of dropped and the magic was kind of gone, and you probably could have just walked away from this topic and just moved on with your life for all kinds of, good reasons. But thanks for sticking around and for sharing it and for continuing on that journey, publicly, because just what that represents to people, that may be on the line or maybe starting to have doubts about the things that they believed in for so long. And it's not easy to question yourself and to think about how you put so much stock and weight into things that probably weren't true and didn't deserve it. And you need to reassess and reevaluate and, move on. And that's not an easy thing to do. As human beings, we're very accustomed to being locked in our positions, and we have, egos and desires, and it's very hard to change. It's not easy, and it can be very difficult for people and emotional. And a lot of people might just, not ever face that. And it's a lot easier to kind of keep doing what feels good, maybe. I know I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, I think that what you've done by putting, your journey out there publicly and continuing to do so, that in itself is just so beneficial for some people. And just putting yourself out there just deserves so much commendation and thanks.
Thank you.
Really.
That really means a lot to me. That does, because there have been, exit points. In fact, I talk to Jack about this all the time. It's like, at what point do we just walk away and go take an art class or start the band back up or do, all of these things that 95% of the world does. We're such a tight knit, we're a small group of people, but there's something there. And it's like, I feel kind of the same way about the UFO topic that I do with the domestic violence stuff. I mean, if I can maybe make a change and get things to happen on a local level for other victims of domestic abuse, then hopefully I can do the same in the UFO world. And people have been coming out and talking about their experiences, and this is serious. This isn't something that I'm making up, something you're not making up. I mean, people are being approached, people are being groomed, people are being taken advantage of, and there are people, like I've talked about on many, many shows, people that are not in a good mental state, who are being manipulated and lied to, and it really destroys their lives. And having been somebody that was right there on the brink, and I know that these, there was a concerted effort to make sure I was there, and I'm not there. And thank you very much. You're not going to do that to me. I'll just say that publicly. But I made it through, and so I hope that our stories can be an inspiration for other people, so they don't have to go through what we've gone through. And I think that's really powerful. And thank you for understanding and appreciating that about what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've got to ask because I know that Peter is in here asking questions, and I'm totally off on
He
my.
always has great questions,
I know,
Peter
I love
does.
Peter. I love Peter. You've got to go check out his show, Shadowy Spectrums. He does like the slickest production, and I'm always telling him how jealous I am of like just all of the stuff that he does, and he's got a great sound guy, and he's so cool. I love Peter. So anyway, Peter wants to know what your take is on alien abductions and Bud Hopkins.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, I guess my take is probably similar to what Jack Brewer has talked about on here. Certainly, we were just talking about people being taken advantage of and people that might not be in the right headspace or have other problems going on, and they're only exasperated by people within the topic. Leaders, popular figures in the topic, and I think that the alien abduction milieu and Hopkins, and I think that that's one of them certainly. I think that there's been a lot of great work done on that, and again, people that have come forward and talked about the experiences and the abuses and the way that they were taken advantage, and they've come forward with evidence of that too, so that we can look at the tapes and we can listen to regressions and hear the manipulation that's going on. There's been I think a lot of not great, but there's way too many examples, I think, of ways that the alien abduction and just the UFO topic in general has negatively had negative consequences for people because of. And yeah, I'll leave it at that, I guess. I know Jack's talked a lot about the alien abduction and the big three. And if anybody is looking for more information, Strange Arrivals did a great season this year. Strange Arrivals podcast did a great season, taking a nice look at the alien abduction phenomena, and the Bud Hopkins and John Mack and David Jacobs, the big three abduction guys. And they just did a great job, I think, of looking at it and kind of giving a fair, even-handed, but very specific look at the abduction phenomena, which certainly did not end well or did not make the lives of people better overall, I don't think, who were involved. People who may have had what they thought were experiences in one way or another, or maybe had a real life experience that was traumatic in some way. And none of that was helped, especially by people like John Mack that had a duty to what were, essentially patients. And he had a duty to help them. And I don't think that he did that myself.
And that's great. And I was looking through my archive today, and I came across some abduction research from some of the usual suspects. And I was absolutely, I guess I shouldn't be stunned, but I was horrified at some of the comments from people like Dr. David Jacobs, I'll just say it, and some of the ways he was talking about abductees that were claiming that these women had sticky substance on their legs. I mean, just things that were, now that I look back on it, I just think, oh, and after hearing Emma and people and talking to Jack and things, reading this just made my heart sink. It was just really vile. And I also came across another abduction researcher who was researching an abduction and saying this was alien when a 13-year-old girl had a bald figure appear over her and and basically rape her. And the abduction researcher said that this was an alien. And you can't get much more disturbing than that. And again, these are things that hopefully I will be putting this out there, and hopefully Jack and I can do some research into this. But just reading this is really, really, really heartbreaking to see how many people are actually victims of abuse like that when you're entering into these waters where you have people that, I mean, you would think have these credentials and are, you know, working at universities and then are engaged in behavior like this. So it's, yeah, it'll be interesting to come out with that more. I didn't even tell Jack that today when I talked to him, but it is quite a bombshell. But
No, and that's as sad and disturbing as it is, I look forward to reading that. And it is important that these things are out there and understood so that the topic can be assessed and understood in its full context and its proper context. And in a lot of circles, and unfortunately for a lot of years there, people like David Jacobs were just hailed and looked at as just the greatest thing since sliced bread, and just given all kinds of awards and deference and MUFON and just all kinds of stuff. And meanwhile, they're out there, not adhering to the practices that they should, not being good human beings in many cases, and taking advantage of people. We talk about Emma Woods, and when David Jacobs finally did respond to Emma's experiences that she presented and the truth that she brought forward, his response was essentially, again, to blame the victim and to blame Emma. The cycles are just so similar. And even we can take that even further. These guys wrote books and they, documentaries and TV specials and stuff. And there was all kinds of people that that took what they had to say, and it did not make their lives better, especially if they got involved with them on a personal level and then started doing regression and stuff like that. But yeah, and it's really important that there are people like you and Jack to speak to this kind of stuff, and other, kind of community watchdogs, I guess we could say. It just would be nice if the mainstream topic was as concerned with those types of scruples. Again, what could be, what could have been, what the topic could be, is such a shame. And when people talk about the stigma that UFOs get, well, the influencers, the popular voices, Knapp, Corbell, Elizondo, all the way down to the abduction people like Jacobs, Hopkins, they're the ones that are creating that stigma, that are propagating that stigma, that are making it harder for the topic to get looked at and have people involved in it that maybe could come along. We would like people that are highly educated and have good experience and credentials to be involved in the topic and looking at it. But when they have all kinds of reasons not to, and they never will, that's the stigma. The stigma isn't questioning sensational and unsubstantiated claims. It's favoring them and silencing any type of measured scientific investigation. To the point that even NASA can be trolled, and Arrow is a cover-up, and just all of it.
I know, and it's just interesting to see how, crafty people have been to create the spin and the narrative. It's like, okay, somebody's questioning me, like, and I mentioned this on my shows. You look at, Jan Harzan, when, he was, came out that he was soliciting underage girls and was busted in a sting operation. But I remember hearing from people that were, saying, oh my gosh, he was busted because he was getting ready to tell the truth. And it's like, okay, what about Wendell Stevens? Okay, what about some of these people that you all have allowed to be a part? This is, nothing good is going to happen over here. I can tell you that much. So if you hear me scream and the camera goes, oh my Lord, oh Lord. Okay. Basically, my cat is standing on a table he's larger than the table, so this is not going to work out, but I'm just throwing that out there.
I know, your poor legs, they must have been getting crushed.
I know. Yeah, no, that's okay. COVID was fun for everybody, but we'll blame his little gut on COVID, just like mommy's. But
Me too.
but yeah, I've totally forgot what I was saying. Isn't that
No, that's
lovely?
okay. And I wanted to, if you don't mind, I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I was hoping maybe I could ask you a couple questions,
Yeah.
maybe even just about Skinwalker Ranch or something, change it up a bit.
Yeah.
One thing that a lot of us that are a little more scrutinous and pay attention to detail have come to question is, the whole curse of the ranch, the whole not being able to dig there because bad things happen, but juxtaposed with the idea that of mineral rights, of the ranch mineral rights, not even possibly having been owned by Fugel or Bigelow, which means, that would restrict the type of digging that they could even do on the ranch legally if they didn't own the mineral rights. And you could see how something like that could factor into the claims of there being a curse and they don't dig because of a curse. And I was just wondering if you'd be interested in sharing any type of information that you may have on the status of those mineral rights, perhaps now and in the past.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking that question. I think these are good. And again, this is where the Skinwalker narrative falls apart, because you can actually find out the truth about this. And this is such a crazy story. I can't believe how things line up. But Garth Myers was my bishop. I grew up LDS, and Garth was just a lovely, lovely human being. And his family, he took over the property after his brother passed away, but they were there for decades. And I called his daughter, and when I made the connection, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely insane. But I called his daughter and had a conversation with her, and she just said, everything that, all these claims about anything paranormal are not factual at all. And our family owns the mineral rights under the ranch. And so, yeah, I mean, you can see why there would be no digging. And as far as the curse of Skinwalker Ranch, when you go back to the origin story for that, it's interesting because I've obviously have a lot of magazines here, but you can look at the first two articles that George Knapp wrote for, I think it was UFO magazine or one of the UFO rags. And, he's inserting this narrative, he's creating this myth. And in all actuality, he doesn't really have his facts straight. I mean, the bottom line is that the area is abutting a Ute a reservation. And when you look at the fact that, the Navajo, that would be more of the Dene, that would be more of a Skinwalker type thing, if that is even a thing that is talked about. I've also mentioned one of my former clients, her husband was one of the world's foremost Native American historians and went all over the world collecting stories, oral traditions. And you can go to the University of Utah Special Archives to see his work. And he actually grew up in Roosevelt, which is really interesting. And he knew many, many people, and I would sit across the table from him and talk about, well, tell me about skinwalkers. And he's, what? And so he went through his library that was just insane. And he found maybe 2 books that even vaguely referenced that narrative. And it didn't take place. It's not even a thing in the Uinta Basin. And so I've got to give kudos to George Knapp for again creating another narrative that's absolute garbage when you look at it and start digging into it. Okay, you can't dig on the ranch. Okay, really? Actually, I've got pictures from the Bigelow time period when there's a big bulldozer there. So who knows what they were doing there? But the mineral rights are not owned by anybody there. And so all of these things can be completely blown out of the water. And I think that's one of the reasons that, Brandon Fugel and his crew have blocked me, and why people like Robert Bigelow and Colm Kelleher and people like that won't respond to critical questions about the Skinwalker myth.
And thank you for that, Eric. I appreciate that. And so just to clarify, even still today, the Myers family retains those mineral rights?
My knowledge, yes.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, all really, minutia that takes a lot of time and understanding to get into, right? Like we're just talking about a simple curse about a ranch. And, you have to start getting into the minutia of things like land ownership and mineral rights and regulations and stuff that most people would just have no idea of, and I just, yeah, it's a shame. It is. I say that like all night, I feel like, but even just appropriating, kind of a Native American possible lore and spinning it, for your own
That's really
purposes.
disrespectful, is what it is.
It
I mean,
is.
it's
It is.
really, and even, with, if you're looking at Skinwalker, like this is something that people would not want to bring up. You don't want to mention the name. It is something some people won't talk about because it brings bad luck or the Skinwalker to them. I mean, so to have a bunch of white men go in and create this narrative, and then to top it off, you've got people that are saying that there's a burial ground or sacred grounds there, and yet they're stomping all over it for a TV show, and they haven't, given any of the information to the appropriate people. There are laws in place when it comes to all of these things, and that hasn't been done. And it's just so mind blowing how they've completely just come in and walked over a lot of people, a lot of people that are surrounding the ranch. And it's a shame, but hopefully enough questions are being raised and enough work is being done, and people are starting to see that it's completely bogus. And you bring up such a great point. You can't look at this from a UFO perspective. You have to know people who are in politics in the area. You have to know what's going on with mineral rights. You have to know what's going on with, the Uinta Basin Railway and the plans to create this huge railway that's going from right around the ranch, all the way across Utah, and who the players are who are, signing off legislation to let these things take place. I mean, there's so many things like that when you look at it, or you look at who's on the governor's economic advisory board, who's on the COVID relief board. And this has been really interesting. And you can look into this. And I've talked about this before, so I apologize, you guys, if I'm repeating myself. Obviously I am. But when you look at, the former governor, Herbert, who had Brandon Fugel on the COVID and business advisory board, and you look at some of the questions that have been raised, and I'm not, all this is publicly available about COVID spending, the misuse of COVID funds, specifically in the area of the Uinta Basin, and then maybe ask the questions about some of the people in politics that were involved and things. There are some really, really good stories there, and that's why I've just got to give a shout out to Jack, who has been such an incredible research partner and somebody who's gotten in there and done the digging that needed to be done to start exposing some of the problematic questions with the misuse of taxpayer funding for Phenomicon and things like that. So these are really, it's interesting. And so, Lord Ludicrous, before I let you go, I'm sorry.
Really cool. No, and it is. It's very cool what you and Jack are doing, and the not just the quantity, but the quality of the information and the articles and the stories that you're presenting and breaking down for us. It really is. It's something, Erica, and Jack's just amazing. Just a real sleuth. Really, he is.
Well, we're causing trouble.
But it doesn't take much. But
really,
you guys are definitely going all out. That's for sure. And it's, again, we look at the Skinwalker show and we see that they have the state attorney general on, the highest ranking lawman in the state of Utah. I believe Tom Winterton's dad's a senator, and we're looking at all the instances of cross between them and government funding. And again, these are all things that we could be talking about, Lou Elizondo and that crew and Graves and Mellon and what they're doing with the federal government. There's a lot of crossover there, and none of these things are really important to anybody as far as they're concerned in the larger part of the topic. It's just conspiracy theory or really just getting into things that don't matter. But the money matters all the time, always. It doesn't matter how much you have. No millionaire is in the business of losing money. And the Skinwalker Ranch is a brand. It's a product. It's something that's been invested in. And there's a lot of individuals who are invested in it and have their careers tied up in it and their alleged credibility tied up into it and all kinds of things that probably give them reason to not be transparent and accountable if they're not telling us things that are as they say.
Right. And you bring up a good point about, who's been on the show and who was speaking at Comic-Con with people at the ranch. And so it is very interesting. And there are lots of areas to dig into. And I would say anybody who's, who cares about the subject, it's like, get in there and do some digging, like in your local area, and find out about some of the politics, some of the funding, some of, it's fascinating. And I think that kind of grassroots work is really important to understanding, like, who is credible, who is not, what the motivations are, and that in and of itself is very empowering. So thank you for your questions, and thank you for really supporting the work that Jack and I do. That's cool, and I support you back because I love all the questions that you've asked, the comments that you've made, and I definitely would tell people to follow you on Twitter for sure. And I mean, what are you going to do? What trouble are you up to next?
Thank you. Yeah, and I kick myself a lot for not doing more, and especially what you and Jack are doing and others. You're really putting a lot of time and effort into what you're doing. And I'll be honest, I wish that I could devote more time and do more. It's just tough as it is for you guys too, I'm sure, between life and work and family, and there's all kinds of obligations and other things to do besides UFOs. But I've been doing some blog articles for a blog that I probably will start. I had second thoughts about it. I guess because I felt like, although I wanted to share what I was doing and what I was researching and get information out there in more of a long form format than just kind of tweeting about things and doing interviews here and there. I guess I felt like most people aren't really reading blogs unless they're really the hardcore researchers that are diving in. A lot of people are just more interested in videos these days. But I've also come to the realization that that's more of who I'm kind of interested in talking to, because I'm here, researching and trying to get into the minutia. So I do have some blog articles, and I've also started reaching out to certain researchers and skeptical UFO researchers that that I think should have more attention in the topic and have a lot of great things to say and information and a lot of great experience. And I've been wanting to sit down and record some conversations with people along that lines. So there's that. And then just really just the daily life of being a UFO fan in itself, and following usually all the noise to look for the signal. Is time consuming in itself. And Jack's been very gracious in helping me develop my FOIA abilities. And he's just been awesome as far as being available to help me with that and to give me pointers. And I'm just looking to contribute in any way that I can with the limited amount of time that I generally have. Because if it wasn't, like I said, for people that had done it before, who knows where I'd still be, So I guess I feel like I'd like to pay it back forward a little bit. And of course, if there's anything I can ever do to help expanding frontiers in any way, even just doing some grunt work to get some paper work or some, low-level stuff off your hands so you guys have more time, please don't ever be afraid to ask. I'd be more than happy to help.
I'll take you up on that. And like I said, it's just, I think for me, it's so rewarding just to know that people like you are out there, and that, like I really feel we have a community, and so I think it really means a lot to me, and I appreciate your support, and I will be taking you up on that. So Good luck.
Thank you, Erica. No, it means a lot to me too. And this has been great. Really, thank you for inviting me on tonight. It's been my pleasure. I can't think of anything else I'd rather have done on my Friday night.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'll definitely catch you on Twitter. So
You know it.
take care. Absolutely. Take care. Thank
All right.
you.
Have a great night and a great
You too.
weekend. See
Thank
you,
you.
everybody out there.
Bye. So anyway, that is so much fun to have Steve on the show. Like I mentioned, I love getting on Twitter and reading what he has to say. He's such a, for me, that gives me hope. It gives people like Jack hope to know that there are, just people like all of you listening to the show. And I want to thank UFO John Doe, The Earth, Lord Ludicrous, Peter. I want to give a special thanks to Mario, who is here every week with me and has been supporting my show for many, many years. That is really cool. I want to thank all the people who are donating to keep the show on the air. And I also want to thank the people who are donating to Expanding Frontiers Research. And sorry, I'm a little distracted, but again, you've got a certain person over here, a certain cat, who is going to cause trouble. So I guess this means that I need to go have a little bonding time. But thank you guys for being here. Thanks. And I will catch you next week. And next week, just to give you guys a heads up, since Tony is over in the UK, we are going to be starting the show at 2:00 Mountain Time, just so he doesn't have to be up too late. He's got a family, and so we will do that. So look for the show at 2, and you can catch the runs after that. So anyway, you guys have a wonderful evening, and I will catch you next week.